All right, today I want to talk about the soundboard. It's the Tascam Model 16 soundboard. Isn't it cute? Okay, let me get it into place here. I'm just going to kind of stare at it while I talk about it, I think. It's lovely. I'm just going to stare at it. So I've been using this soundboard since November. It's now the beginning of February. So I've had some time to use it in a little more depth. I've had some time to explore the board. And I think that's really important to do before commenting on a product or, giving any kind of acting like you're giving any kind of in-depth review, right? I want to do reviews on my channel that are a bit more thought out and honest about things. So with that being said, I am not getting paid to do this video at all, not a single penny. So if you feel like supporting my channel, check out the links in my description. I have a link to the soundboard on Zounds, and then I have other links like my Patreon and stuff that helps me keep my channel, I don't know, nerdy, I guess. I don't know what it is that I'm doing, but I did not take a single penny to make this video. And I don't know, I think that's kind of important to mention if you're showing a product, right? So this soundboard can be used as an interface or for live events. And I've been primarily using it for live events. There's a weekly open mic night that I've been running sound for. I've been using it for that every single week. And then I've also used it for events like our cozy concert, which I streamed live here on YouTube. So I can put like a card up on the screen or something if you want to check that out. We'll talk about that in a little more depth in a little bit as well. Since I live streamed that, I'm actually going to do a bit of a comparison between the live stream audio and then the audio that I got out of the soundboard, because you can record audio using the soundboard as well. So we will be listening to that comparison in a little bit. So with that said, I think for the first chunk of this video, I want to switch over to holding my GoPro over the soundboard and kind of showing you all the different features that I've been noticing and been using and what I think about them and, I don't know, whatever else comes up. And we'll do that. And then we'll do a listening comparison and listen to some of the sounds that I've gotten out of this soundboard. Some of the mixes that I've made using audio recorded onto the soundboard directly. And I think that'll be about it. That'll be like the agenda for today. We'll wrap up after that. I might talk a little bit too about some of the features that I wish the board had, some things that I wish were slightly different. And yeah. So let's get started with this overview and kind of nerd out about the details here. Okay, so here's what I figured out about this board and my thoughts about it. So initially, right, it comes in the box with an IAC power cable, so that's this type of end here, and then the manual and the board, and that's basically it. It's pretty great for carrying it around to gigs. The actual box itself is what I've been carrying it around in. There's some styrofoam that comes on either side of this, and it sits nicely in there with this in its own little cardboard thing, and it's pretty simple and easy to pack up and take away with you, and yeah, that's been good. So I like that it's an IAC power cable. It's not one of those like dinky thin ones, not one of those little tiny round ones. It's a nice standard professional power cable. I don't know. I don't need to hate on the other type, but I do like this kind. I like that it comes with this kind. And the physical manual is kind of nice to have. I did just kind of reference it online as well. You can find it there. So let me power this up and let's take a look at the actual soundboard. All right, so to start with, we might go from the top to the bottom. I might get a little distracted partway through, but I'll try to do this in kind of an organized manner. So to start with, it's an analog mixer. It has 14 line and 10 mic inputs. So that's actually a good amount of inputs if you're looking to do something like a small show or open mic nights or stuff like that. A lot of purposes, this would be more than sufficient. It's been more than sufficient for what I've been doing. And it's kind of interesting. It actually has a 16-track recording capability, and that's when you include that main mix left and right bus. So that main left and right out. And those 16 tracks can be input to the computer when you use it as an interface, or you can just use it for live sound and live recording straight to an SD card. So that's mostly what I've been doing is I've been putting an SD card in here and I've been recording straight to that SD card instead of using it as an interface. That's the bulk of what I've been doing with it. And I've been using this 128 gig SD card. It's been great. It holds a ton of audio. 16 tracks, hours and hours and hours. So it's been really good for that. And on the back here, I think I might have shown it to you already. There's that USB input if you do want to use it for an interface. And that supports up to USB 2.0 resolution, and it goes up to 24-bit and 48 kilohertz. I also like it's been really handy here. I've been using this aux input for my cell phone to run sound in the house between sets. So it's really great for that. This whole track, that's why I have it labeled as music. But yeah, I've been using it for that. It's been really good for that. And there are Bluetooth capabilities. I haven't dug into this a ton, but it's there if you want to use it. Now at the top here you have your preamps. That's pretty standard for a soundboard, right? We have our low cut buttons as well. Those have been really helpful in some of the spaces I've been in. There's a lot of times in untreated spaces or minimally treated spaces, there's a big issue with bass. And so this has really helped me tame that. And one of the things that I've been using a lot is the built-in compression. So these green knobs here are all compressors. And it's just on channels, I believe, 1 through 8. So tracks 1 through 8. Yeah. So you have 8 different compressors for the first 8 tracks. And these are analog compressors, which I think is pretty rad. And I also like how they come with a little light that lights up when you hit the threshold and it starts to actually compress. So it'll tell you when it's active. So that's a great way to get a starting point for your compression, especially if you're not as used to listening for compression. Oh, and before I forget, channel 1 and 2 have insert capabilities here, and the faders are great. I've had no issues with the faders. Sometimes with, the cheaper boards, the faders are kind of like they kind of bounce around or they misbehave, so to speak, or they're kind of a pain to use. But these are 60mm faders, and they've been very precise and that's super smooth to move around, and they always, stay right where I want them to stay. They've been very convenient and nice to use. No complaints there. I haven't had any trouble with those. Now, while we're kind of distracted down at the bottom of the board, see, I told you I'd get distracted. There are multiple buses here, right? So we have the main mix, main left and right bus, right? That's kind of a bus, but sometimes people don't think of it as a bus. We also have the sub bus and monitor outs. So you can have monitors set up with this. You can have a sub set up with this. We also have our effects. That's on its own dedicated fader. And I just send the effects out using these effects knobs here towards the bottom of our chunk of knobs. That's the technical term, is chunk of knobs. So yeah, we have those multiple buses, and we also have 3 aux sends. So one's that effects send, and then we have 2 other aux sends that we can send out through. So monitor 1, monitor 2, and effects. It's pretty simple, pretty easy, very straightforward for how to send things out there. All right, and so for each of these input channels, as we go down, right, we talked about most of this. I'll get back to this in a second here. But what I want to talk about next, because this has been one of the most relevant things to me while using the soundboard, is the EQ section. So that's what all these blue knobs are. So for each track, you have 4 of these blue knobs for the EQ section. And I believe they call it a semi-parametric EQ. And that's because basically you have the low and the high, and you're just raising or lowering that. That's a set value there. It's 80 hertz and 10 kilohertz. And then this middle value here, you get to set the frequency and then set how much you raise or lower it. So there's some ability to manipulate it and control it a little bit more than a lot of these simple soundboards have. And this has been great. Honestly, it's been a lot better than I expected it might be, but I also wish I had more control over these. As someone who has worked with boards where you can do stuff like notch filtering and be very specific with your EQs and very targeted with your EQs, it's kind of frustrating to have a more dull one, but I wouldn't really expect a soundboard of this size to have a better EQ section. I think this has actually been better than I really expected. And, you change these values and it does make a significant difference to the sound. So you really can start to target things like feedback to some extent and, adjust the tone as well. So while we're on EQs, I also did notice that we have this master fader or master section EQ. What do they call it? Yeah, master section EQ is what they're calling it. This is great. For example, the open mic night that I've been doing every Monday night, there's a lot of low end in that space. And so this can be great. For example, if everything's going to have more low end than it should, you can use this to adjust that. And then you don't necessarily have to do it as much on this end, right? So this I would use to adjust changes in the house, adjust things that you want to affect everything, right? Makes sense. Duh. And these, I believe they call semi-parametric as well. So this is a 4-band semi-parametric instead of the 3-band that we have here, right? So 1, 2, and then 3. This is 1, 2, and then 3, 4. So it's a 4-band semi-parametric EQ, right? So we set the frequency on these 2 here, and then we can adjust the decibel level for those bands here, and then we have the high and the low. So it's the same idea, you just have one extra chunk here. And, we talked about using this knob to send out to the effects aux. We can adjust what effects we're using here, what effect we're using here in this section. So we have the select button here, and you can see, I don't know how bad the glare is here, but you can see there's a list of all the effects here. And when you click on this select button, it'll show you on the screen. Oh, I was in it and then I jumped out of it. It'll show you on the screen the different effects that you can have. So right now I'm on studio reverb. I've been using that one a lot, but you can toggle between all the options that are down here, up here, just using this jog wheel and moving around. And there's not a ton of control with these. So for example, if I choose this one, I can go to this parameter and I can adjust it a little bit, but it's pretty much just like one parameter for each thing. There's not a ton of control over them. But they sound pretty good. I've been enjoying the studio reverb a lot lately. There's a few others that I really like. To be honest, when using this to record, I then bring it into Pro Tools and add effects there. I record and import the effects track that we use during the live show, but I've often not really been using that in the final mix. I like to add it in Pro Tools where I can have a little bit more control over it. But this is clutch for the actual live show. So yeah, you can do multi-track recording and playback just using the SD card, just freestanding like this. Or you can also hook it up through the computer. You can also use Bluetooth audio playback and recording as well. I tend to not trust Bluetooth if I can help it. I'd rather just have a hard line input to something that feels a little bit more reliable to me. So that's what I tend to do. Maybe I'm old school. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter a ton for your house music, but I'd rather just set my phone next to the soundboard and be good with it, know that it's connected. And there are also some fun features within this if you want to dig into it. So there are things like punching in and out functions per track, including punching in and out automatically and using foot switches. I don't have a foot switch, but that sounds like a lot of fun, punching in and out with a foot switch. It also supports SD or SDHC cards and SDXC cards. I don't know all of the differences with these different types of cards. They say that it requires a class 10 or more, but I do recommend, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, there is some finickiness with the SD card functionality here. So I do recommend being very specific and making sure you get exactly what they recommend and then only using it with the soundboard. And that's what we did. We got a dedicated SD card here and I only use it. I have it in the soundboard and then I back it up to the computer and then I put it back in the soundboard. I don't even format it on the computer. So that's what I've been doing. And I mentioned the foot switch. There's the input up here for the foot switch. There's a lot of fun capabilities with this foot switch. So you can do things like select, play, pause. You can do effect muting, punching in and out, stuff like that. So there's more that you can do with the foot switch if you really want to dig into it. But yeah, what else do we have? We have the main outputs, right? So we have left, right, main out. We have, main control room, left, right, so to speak. Headphone outputs if you want to listen through phones. You can adjust those levels. You can make them PFL, AFL. You have left and right bus monitoring that can be enabled separately as well. And they also have dedicated software for this whole board for Windows and Mac when connecting it with a USB cable, like when you use it for an interface. So if you do want to get this board, that is available. You can download and install that, run that. So this is something that used to drive me crazy is the phantom power button, like one button for the entire board. I think I was spoiled back in the day when I was working with these bigger soundboards. But this is pretty common on smaller boards. And basically, you just want to keep it in mind. You're basically going to have to decide between ribbon microphones and condenser mics. You can't really have both, although if you're doing live sound, that's not too hard a decision, right? I'd probably choose condenser mics. Ribbon mics that break more easily. They tend to be more expensive sometimes, stuff like that. But, you actually could choose both if you're using something like a cloud lifter with a ribbon mic. So there's that. You can work around it if you want. You just have to be aware of it because if you run phantom power to something like a ribbon mic, you're going to break it, right? So you just want to be careful. You want to be aware of that. And, you want to keep in mind, they say this in the manual, you do not want to connect or disconnect the mics or, anything with the phantom power switched on. So, the world is your oyster, I guess. There's always a workaround. I'll put a link to the cloud lifter in the description in case you want to check that out. I use that with ribbon mics all the time. I really like it. It helps boost the signal, you know, besides protecting it from the phantom, it does help boost the signal, so it's really good for that. There's a few others on the market that are very similar to the Cloud Lifter, but the Cloud Lifter is what I've been using, so that's what I mentioned, right? Another thing to keep in mind is that you do not want to connect or disconnect mics when this is on, right? So they actually say this in the manual, right? It's probably not the biggest or worst thing that you could do, but doing that, disconnecting when this is still on, could cause a loud noise and it might damage the unit, it might damage the connected equipment. So you just want to, like, good habit, turn that off so that light is no longer on before you disconnect everything at the end of your show or gig or whatever it is. All right, so what else have we missed with this board? We talked about the main outputs, that whole section, the different aux outputs, the foot switch, stuff like that. We talked about our inputs. We talked about our preamps, our low cut. Oh, so we have this mode button, right? So it's live, PC, or meter is what it is. And basically with live, it uses the signal from the input jack as your input source. If you set it to PC, it's going to use the signal from a computer that's connected to it using that USB port as the source. And then for meter, it's going to use a playback signal from the SD card as the input source. So that's just, that's there if you want to switch it. And as you can probably guess from how these are set here, I've been mostly just leaving it on live here, and it hasn't caused me any trouble with the recording process. I'm just careful with how I set my gain staging, and it's been working very, very smoothly. If you have a working knowledge of, basic gain staging structuring, properties, right? You should be fine. So what else? We talked about the compressor, the EQs, the auxes. We have pan knobs for each of our tracks. We'll go into the functionality a little bit on this board in a second here, but I guess we just have these two buttons to talk about really. So for each of these tracks, for each of these channels, we have a mute button that mutes the channel, right? So now if I want to leave my fader up while, someone else is performing, and then when the actor that's connected to this or the performer that's connected to this is active, I can unmute it. You could do things that way. You can also just bring the faders up and down. There's different schools of thought there. And then we have these record enable buttons. So depending on the mode you're in, you might have to press these and just make sure that all your tracks are record enabled if you want it to record to all those tracks, right? So it's just like when you record enable a track in something like Pro Tools or any other DAW, you're just telling the software, hey, this is a track I want to record to. So you can do that. You can leave out, for example, things that you're not using, and then hopefully save some data, save some transfer, stuff like that. So yeah, every time I use this soundboard, I go here to the main screen first. And then what I do is I hit menu, let's see, and I try to remember what I'm doing. Every time I have to think about it a little bit. And there are these things called songs. And basically, if you make a new song for the new session or the new day, it's going to put it all in its own folder, and it makes it much easier to deal with, right? So hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing here, but I'm going to say what I'm doing too, just in case here. So at the beginning of every day, especially, I want to make sure that I've backed up the previous time's worth of stuff if I'm going to do this first step, but I'll go menu, I'll go to system here. It's towards the bottom, I believe. And then I scroll down and I go to media format and I hit okay and I hit erase. And you hit yes, it makes you confirm it. Thank you for making us confirm it. But this is the reformat. This is how I reformat it. It takes a little bit, but I usually do that and then I'll walk away and plug some stuff in the house and then I'll come back. So that's how you reformat it. I have tried to reformat it elsewhere and it's chaos. I'll talk about that in a second. But let's give it some time to format. And I have tried to reformat it on a computer. That's one of the first things I did with a previous SD card. I tried reformatting it on a computer. And basically what I did is I took it out of the soundboard. I put it in the soundboard initially, and the soundboard was like, oh, I should format this for you. And I was like, yes, please. And it did it. We did some recording. I put it on the computer. I backed up what I had just recorded. And then what I did is I was like, well, I'll just reformat it using the computer. So I went in, I reformatted it using the same formatting language it was already in. So it was ms.fat32 is what the soundboard formatted it into. And then when I took it out of the computer and put it back into the soundboard, the card, it said that it was an invalid card and it asked to use a different card. So I went down this whole rabbit hole of forums and it was very interesting. And basically it sounds like this board can be very, very picky about cards and reformatting cards. I'll put a link in the description to one of the forum posts that I found. But basically that's why I always format it using the soundboard only. Now that I have this dedicated SD card for it, I only format it using the soundboard. Okay, so now that it's formatted, the next thing I'll do is I'll go to create a new song, right? So now there's no song on here. I'm no longer on that previous song. So I want to go to menu, and then I go to song. That's the first option there. And then what I do is I just hit new, and you can name it. So the first thing I do is I choose the format here. So 44.1, 16-bit is kind of low, right? So I just go all the way up to the highest option. Here, I'll toggle through the options so we can see it, right? 44.1 kilohertz, 16-bit. You can do 44.1 24-bit, you can do 48 16, and you can do 48 24. So I always do 48 24. I just crank this till it's at the highest value, and then I hit name, and then I rename my song. This is like one of those ancient systems for naming things. My soundboard from high school, middle school, I don't know, like early 2000s had this system. I'm like, wow, I haven't used one of these in a while, but it's not too bad if you're just doing it once at the beginning of the day and then hitting record for the whole event. So then I hit OK. I create my song. So what it's done there is now it's created a folder for that song. When I hit menu, you'll see the title for the song name, how much time has been recorded, stuff like that. Once you hit record, this will start progressing. So for example, if I hit record, now time is progressing for me. And basically, it's going to create a folder with all the different tracks for me, track 1 through 16. And then that's what I can easily take off the soundboard to use for later. And it's all going to line up. It's lovely. So yeah, that's it. Recording audio onto this thing, if you're just using the SD card, is super easy, very convenient, almost no extra anything to carry or bring with you beyond what you would have for the live show. I've been using it to record every single week, sometimes multiple times a week. It sounds great, and I'll play some samples here for you in a bit. And one thing I've noticed in terms of the recording that I really like is that it does record this stereo verb, right? Whatever effect you're using. I've been using it for verb a lot. So it does record that as a separate track. So it makes it really easy for you to then decide later whether you want to use that in your final mix or add your own reverb and your own effects. And I've done some stuff like started a song and then took out the SD card and looked at it before I even recorded anything. And it does seem like it's prepping files for each track before even recording it. There's something about how it works there to be said, I think, but it preps immediately for you. And the other thing that's really cool is that the power got cut on this a couple times while it was still recording, while everything was still on. Someone accidentally cut the power or accidentally unplugged it or whatever before I was ready. And my audio was still created. So even if it's still in the middle of the recording process, at least I got lucky and it still created those audio files and we didn't lose any data. So that's been immensely helpful. It's like, especially when you have a bunch of people running around an event, right? Things can happen, chaos can happen. It's nice to know that you'll still have your files, you'll still have your recording. If that's a goal, right? It'll still be there. So some other thoughts about this are the sound levels, right? So I know a lot of older boards, a lot of more affordable boards don't have a ton of sound power to them. And this one has a good amount of sound power to them. I'm usually only using like the bottom third of the meters, the main left and right meters. And I've been able to get things very loud, very, very, very loud. And it's been great and it sounds great. And you could push it a lot more if you wanted to, honestly. So it has a good amount of power behind it. So I know that's not always as much of a concern nowadays, but I was able to get a lot of good, clean, loud sound out of this, and a lot of nice, powerful, beautiful sounding loudness. And I wasn't even getting close to pushing the limits of this board. So it's got plenty of power. I could definitely recommend it for that feature. And honestly, if your goal is to use this as an interface, there are a ton of features that I'm not even going to dig into in depth or show you necessarily that are built into this board that are really great, right? So things like not just the foot switch capabilities that we already talked about, stuff like punching in, stuff like that, but there are undo last record functions, for example. You can add marks, there are jogging functions, there's clearing and importing tracks. There are also functions like the MIDI timecode function where you can get it to synchronize with your DAW or computer, right? So there's a lot here, if you are curious about it, I would really recommend digging into that manual that's available online so you can see exactly what this can do and how that can suit your purposes. Okay, so I am going to end this section of the video talking about some of the features that I wish this board had. You know, what are some of the things that I actively thought while using this for the past few months, gee, I really wish it had this, right? And just as a disclaimer, my frame of reference is old, a little outdated because I haven't done live sound in a while, but it is from using extremely expensive boards when I was working on things like traveling Broadways, right? And, you know, other musical theater types of gigs. And so I got used to some very nice, very expensive boards. It's not fair to compare something like this to something like that. But with that said, I'm spoiled. Here are some of my thoughts. For example, I mentioned to you how I wish it had a more specific EQ. So any kind of capability to get a little bit more control over this EQ, even something like a Q knob on this middle one would be so great. It could really help you target things, you know, lengthening it and getting a little bit more EQ capabilities in there would be so, so nice. But honestly, I don't know if I would have designed it differently if I was designing this board. I know that there are considerations to be made whenever you try to add something to a physical device like this. So, yeah. The other thing that I would have loved to have is more control over the compression. So things like the ratio, you're basically setting the threshold here, I believe. And it works great. It sounds great. I don't have a ton of complaints there, but it might be fun to have more control over the compressor, you know, more control over some of the parameters within the compressor. And the only other thing that really bugged me were the effects, right? So it's all about control here. I just wish I could mess with this more like I do in Pro Tools, which is kind of silly and kind of ridiculous. But I do wish there was more choice over effects and more control over the parameters within the effects. Because a lot of these effects, they only have control over like one or two parameters. There's not a lot of detail about what those parameters are. You have to like dig into things to figure it out. And I'm not sure like how much I would actually stress about this because, to be honest, if you're recording, I would just import it into Pro Tools and then use the effects within Pro Tools or whatever your DAW is, because it's going to be better than whatever you can put on a small board like this. It just would be fun to be able to like layer effects and do some more things with the effects and control the effects a bit more during the live show. It'd be a little bit more fun. I don't know. So those are my thoughts. They're spoiled thoughts, but those are them. Okay, let's move on to listening to the soundboard. Okay, so that's the basic idea of the soundboard. There's so much more that I could have dug into here. There's really a lot to this board. I've been really impressed with it. Next, let's do that listening sample that I promised. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little bit of that cozy concert footage, some of the live stream, like a clip from the live stream, and then I'll play a little bit of the mix that I got off this board. So that is the audio that's been directly recorded onto this SD card. So that'll give you an idea of what it sounds like going into the board, what it sounds like, what you can do with the board. And just remember that this is outside. This is an outdoor concert. So let's roll it. All right, so I'm going to start with the cozy concert footage. So this first clip is from Anthony Frijia. Anthony, I'm really sorry if I said your name wrong. There were some jokes during the show about his last name and how to pronounce it correctly, and I honestly forget which one's the right way. So you know, but I will have these links in the description of this video as well, and I'll have put a card up for this cozy concert footage so you can check it out. But here's the footage from the live stream. All right, so this is the beginning of a song. I'll just play part of this, and then I'll switch to the Pro Tools session from the soundboard.
All my music's on all the streaming platforms. The ground was wet, the sky was dark. You took her bed, and she took your heart. Wrapped it around an oak tree like you did that 67 GTO. Oh no.
All right, so this is recorded, it's streamed, right? So of course YouTube is changing the audio. And then besides that, this is streamed through a cell phone. So it did sound better in person through the actual PA. So keep that in mind, but I did want to show you what the setup looked like. You know, we have the PA speakers here in front of the artist, and then we just had a single mic and a DI, and that was basically it. So let me switch to the Pro Tools session. And I think this is right about where we might have been in the song.
Oh no, lovers leave chaos and close and quiet corners where you rarely ever go. And one day you'll find proof that she was real despite your struggle to forget. Oh yes, you're in a fight to the death, my friend. Black metal t-shirts, your shield. You've got the past on your breath, my friend. Now name all the monsters you've killed. Let's name all the monsters you've killed.
So that's Anthony's song clip. And, you know, I did do a rough mix of this entire thing, but it was hours long. So let's see, period 8, period to jump to this marker for number 8, end. Hours long. So, you know, with that in mind, I didn't do everything I would do if it was a shorter mix, but it gives you an idea of what you can get out of the board. And you can see here, I have a good amount of plugins on the Master Fader, and I go kind of wild with plugins. I know a lot of people aren't in favor of that, but I do kind of go a little bit wild. And I did add a bunch of my own reverb and delay and stuff. So let's hear how this sounds on a female voice. So let's switch to Rachel's stuff. So I'm going to do period 4 period to jump to this marker here. So let me find this spot in the Cozy Concert first. So I mentioned that this is Rachel. This is Rachel J. So her info is going to be in the description of this video, and it's also available in the Cozy Concert live stream. If you're curious, please go check out her music. Please go check out all these artists' music. They're amazing, amazing artists. So I'm just going to play this clip from her song here.
Doesn't work the same, and if it did, I wouldn't play. So I will follow the heart that's done me wrong. Keep her safe within my arms and grant her any little advice. I'm enamored by a stranger, and I don't feel any danger. I surely never take my own advice.
So again, you can see what the setup is. It's just a microphone, a single microphone. Actually, I don't think we used a 58. I think it was Evan's microphone that we used. I'll have to put that in the description. But just one microphone and then a DI. And I believe it might have been a radial DI. I'll have to check that, but I'll put it in the description, whatever it was, if I can figure it out, if we remember what it was. So let's listen to this out of the soundboard.
So I will argue with the devil on my shoulder, tempting my will. Conscience hasn't any thrill. She tries to guide me through the years, but her wisdom disappears when I cover up my ears. 'Cause how can I trust a voice that's not my own? Though my instincts do me wrong, well, I'm willing to roll the dice. I get swept away by madness, and it justifies the sadness, so I'll surely never take my own advice.
I love it. I'm like playing longer clips here than I expected because I'm getting into it, just listening to it. But yeah, this was pretty easy to pull together. You can see I don't have a ton on their vocals, so just some basic EQ for all of them, some compression, some dynamic control, stuff like that. So just that, and then the reverb, really. Not a ton of automation either, as you can see here on the actual vocal track. There's a bit more automation that I put on the reverb just so that it wouldn't be too overwhelming when they were speaking, but that was kind of my only goal with that. But I'm not going to get into the mix too much here. Let's take a look at one of Evan's songs. All right, so this final clip is from the lovely Evan Diamond. You can see the setup's all the same. And again, I will have links to her stuff in the description below for this video, and it's also available here in this cozy concert video. And I'm also going to link to CatoNoise because the song she's about to play here, we decided we wanted to share this song, and this song is a CatoNoise song. CatoNoise is Evan and I, and it's just the music that we've started to make together. It's a new thing for us. It's been a lot of fun. And this song's called Set the Break. So I'm just going to hit play here.
I'm everywhere, I'm nowhere all at once. It's nothing new, nothing you haven't heard before. I'm an imposter in my own skin, so let it sink in. You can set the break, but it'll scar.
And now I'm going to switch to that Pro Tools session here. This is where the song starts around here, so I'll just play around here.
Nothing you haven't heard before. I'm an imposter in my own skin, so let it sink in. You can set the break, but it'll scar. I don't wanna be here. It's how we learn to live. It's how things are. I'm on the edge of starting something I can't finish. I've been moving on, you're moving on, but I can't win this. No, the heat in summertime, do you mind? No, no. If it stays inside my head, would that be fine? You set the break, but it'll scar.
So yeah, that's it. All this audio in this Pro Tools session that you heard is from the soundboard. All the audio files were imported from the soundboard, and they're all from this outdoor concert that you're seeing here in this stream. So let me know what you think. I've been really happy with this soundboard. So yeah, that's it. I've really been enjoying this soundboard. I've become very attached to it. I think for the current price, it's about $7.99 US as of filming this. And I think that's actually a really good price point for what you get out of this soundboard. I think that's a great deal. You look at comparable soundboards and sometimes they're a lot more, like a lot more. So price point, I think it's pretty good. But let me know what you think in the comments below, you know. Let me know what you think of the soundboard, what you think of the sound that I got out of the soundboard. Am I crazy? Does it make sense? Do you like it? I like it. Also, let me know if you want to see a video where I look at the Pro Tools mix for that cozy concert footage and kind of show you what I did do to the mix. So I did take the audio off the sound cord. I did take the audio off the sound card. Again, I did it again. I did take the audio off the sound card and I imported it into Pro Tools and I did a very rough mix. The concert was hours long, so it was a very, very rough mix. And you know, just keep in mind, if you get a big sound card like I have in here, you can record hours and hours and hours of audio, and it does a good job. I haven't had it fail yet, and I've been doing it at least once a week, so recording hours onto this thing. So yeah, let me know if you want to see a video where we dig into the mix for that audio specifically, just in case you're curious of, you know, what it might have sounded like before I mixed or without some of the mix techniques that I added. Just let me know in the comments below. Also, we are talking about potentially doing something like a vinyl or a Bandcamp release of some of these songs from the Cozy concert. So myself and the artists are currently planning on doing that, hoping to do something along those lines. So keep an eye out for that. I'm sure I'll make some kind of announcement if and when we do that. And yeah, I don't know. Should I try another soundboard next? If I should, what do you think I should try? Which one should I try? What seems to be good in this space? Let me know. I love suggestions. I'm always looking for suggestions. So let me know if you have a recommendation for a soundboard I should try on this channel. I think I'd be down to try another one for this channel. So just let me know if you have any recommendations. And again, this is an unbiased review. I was not paid for this review. I doubt Tascam even knows who I am. So with that said, if you want to support my channel and reviews like this one, please check out the links in my description. I'd really appreciate it. And thank you, thank you, thank you so much to my Patreon patrons. You are all amazing, and I couldn't do this channel without you. Oh, and before I go to YouTube jail for being bad at this, among those links will be a link to this soundboard. And if you're interested in getting it, if you watch this and you like it, consider using my link. It helps. I get a portion of it. It's just an affiliate link. It's not like anything that fancy, but a portion of those proceeds will go to my channel. So you know how that works. So yeah, that's it. I come out with new videos every Wednesday, and thank you so, so, so much for hanging out. Okay. We'll talk about that in a little more depth in a little bit as well. Yeah. I put some board tape on the soundboard, but it's kind of out of date, so I think I need to update it if I'm gonna keep it on here. It's really cool, like the big new soundboards, you don't need board tape anymore because they just digitally, you can enter the name of the track, and it's so cool. I have a friend who I used to work with. We worked on Traveling Broadways together years ago, and he does he's running the soundboard for Disney's Frozen right now. And he was in town, Frozen was in town, and I got to go see it and like hang out at the soundboard with him and just nerd out before and after, and like a little bit during too. I don't even know how he was focusing on telling me stuff and also running the soundboard, but it was so cool to see how much things have changed since I stopped doing live sound, because it was years ago when I stopped. And it was just really cool. It was really cool to like, we were comparing the studio versus the live sound stuff, because like he's kept going with the live sound stuff, and like, so much has changed, and he's learned so much more, and like I've learned so much more about the studio stuff. And it was just like he came over, him and his girlfriend came over, and we were talking about all the studio stuff, and then we went to the show, and I got to talk about all the live sound stuff. And I don't know, I'm such a nerd. I loved it so much. It was so cool. So shout out to Ian. I don't think you watch my videos, but it was really cool. So thanks. Also, I love that, having like a friend that you worked with years ago and just kind of like pick up like that when it's been years since you've really talked to them in much detail at all. It was like, oh yeah, we're friends. We're both into the same thing, like really into the same thing. And back at it, like instantly nerding out together and having fun and like super comfortable. And I don't know, I just love that stuff. That's why I do a lot of this YouTube stuff. It's like building that community and that connection with other people that are into the same stuff as you. I don't know. Now I'm just getting sappy, so I'm gonna stop. But I hope you're all doing well, and chat with me in the comments, I guess.